everybody, and welcome to San Francisco Ballet's Points of View lecture series. My name is Jenny Scholich, and I work in the Department of Education and Training here at San Francisco Ballet, and we're really pleased to be able to provide this free lecture series to the public. In a prior world, we did our Points of View lectures on the stage at the War Memorial Opera House on Wednesday evenings. And so we are continuing the tradition and we'll be offering a new Points of View lecture on Wednesdays following the initial stream of each program of San Francisco Ballet's digital season. And you can find the backlog of the other Points of View lectures we've done so far this year on Facebook, on YouTube, and on our website. Before I introduce you to our host and our guests, I do have a little bit of housekeeping. This event is streaming on Facebook and YouTube, and we may have some time for questions or comments at the end of the discussion. Our panelists cannot see your questions or comments in real time, so I and part of the team will be reviewing and passing those along as they are relevant to the discussion if there's time at the end. So feel free to use the comment boxes on YouTube or Facebook to leave those questions, and then we'll try to bring them to our panelists at the end if there is time. So with that, I'd like to turn to today's program and introduce you to our host, Amelia Baer, who is our artistic administrator here at San Francisco Ballet. She's provided administration for the artistic department since 2018, and that includes helping with 4 repertory seasons. And she's also traveled with the company to Washington, D.C., London, Sun Valley, and Copenhagen on tour. And I'm going to let her introduce our guests. So over to you, Amelia. Thank you all so much for being here.
Hey, fantastic. Thank you, Jenny. And welcome to our viewing audience as well. Today's discussion is going to be about Helgi Tomasson's Romeo and Juliet, which is currently streaming as program 6 of our 2021 digital repertory season. You can currently stream a film of the production that was captured for Lincoln Center at the Movies, and it's available now through May 26th. I'm going to bring up some photos. Just give me one moment to share my screen, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the production before I kick it off with our guests. All right. So I hope everyone can see all right. This production of Romeo and Juliet was created in 1994 by San Francisco Ballet's artistic director and principal choreographer. There we go. Now it should be up here. I'll just ask really quick, Jane, can you see my screen okay with the PowerPoint?
I just see the little pencil, yeah.
Strange, okay. Apologies, everybody. We did just test this, and I think we have the wrong one. How about now?
Yes.
Okay, all right, awesome, back on track. All right, so as I was saying, Romeo and Juliet was choreographed in 1994 by San Francisco Ballet's artistic director and principal choreographer, Helgi Tomasson. He set to the ballet to, I'm gonna try to switch scores here. So there's Helgi working on the ballet. It's set to the score by Sergei Prokofiev, and costumes and set was designed by Jan Jakob Warsay. Lighting design was by Thomas Skelton. And with us today, we have Marty Pistoni, who was the fight scene choreographer for this production. Romeo and Juliet was originally scheduled to close San Francisco Ballet's 2020 season in May of last year. However, unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we couldn't quite get there, but we're glad that we were able to stream a really beautiful video of it during our digital season this year. One thing that was really wonderful was that the company did actually perform the production quite recently. In 2019, we were invited by the Royal Danish Ballet to travel to Copenhagen and do 4 performances for audiences in the Copenhagen Opera House. And everyone on this call right now who's doing this interview was part of that travel to Copenhagen and bringing this really, really large production to audiences there. We had a really beautiful state-of-the-art venue to perform in. And it was really something. So anyway, let me pull that down for a minute. With that, I'm delighted to introduce you all to our guests. who are going to help us understand a little bit more about what it takes to put on what is frankly a really large production with lots and lots of people. So for example, when we traveled to Copenhagen, we not only shipped all of the sets and costumes across the ocean, but we also brought over 100 staff members and dancers with us to make the show happen. And to tell us more about that, we have Anita Paciotti with us. So Anita, say hello.
Hello, everyone.
Anita has been a ballet master with San Francisco Ballet since 1982. And it's a role she assumed after being a dancer with the company since 1968. Anita is a native of Oakland, and she studied drama at UC Berkeley. In 1987, she was also appointed a principal character dancer with the company, and the role of the nurse in Helgi Tomasson's Romeo and Juliet was actually created for her, and she's performed it many, many times over the years. I have a few photos of Anita I wanted to share. I appreciate your patience in finding as I share my screen here. So let me just take us to the right slide. So Anita, here we go. So Anita, this is Anita performing the role of the nurse. And just to give you an idea of the work she does on stage, not just behind the scenes. And this is Anita working with some of the children that we had in Copenhagen, teaching them the steps just a few days before they went on stage as part of the production. So I think it's a very sweet photo. All right, I'm just gonna go back to Zoom here. So next we have Jane Green. Jane is San Francisco Ballet's production stage manager, and she runs performances of Romeo and Juliet behind the scenes. Jane is from Seattle and studied theater at the University of Washington. She's worked with us since 2005, and prior to that, she worked with Pacific Northwest Ballet, Boston Ballet, Texas Ballet Theater, and Complexions Contemporary Ballet. And finally, I'll introduce Marty Pistoni, or as he's known professionally, Martino Pistoni. Marty choreographed the fight scenes for this production and is not only a well-known fight choreographer, but an award-winning actor and theater director. And I believe you're a stuntman as well. So Marty attended the Art Institute of Chicago and later received an MFA in acting from American Conservatory Theater. He also teaches and has faculty credits, including Stanford University, Berkeley Digital Film Institute, American Conservatory Theater, Berkeley Repertory Theater, California Institute of the Arts, the Juilliard School, NYU, and the Lee Strasberg Theater and Film Institute. Marty also is in the production and originated the role of the Prince of Verona. And I was going to show a brief photo. Let's see if I can do that. I've had a few little hiccups with the Zoom here, but I would love to show you all Marty. So this is just really quick. We'll show a photo of Marty with, apologies everyone, a photo of Marty as the prince. He's just here with that. All right. So let me get us started by talking a little bit more about this production. And I'd first like us to make sure that those listening understand the different roles that you all sort of played in forming this production, because you all have a very, very deep knowledge of it from different perspectives. So Anita, could you tell us a little bit more about what a ballet master does, and also if there's anything specifically you recall from being a rehearsal assistant during the creation of this production?
Yeah, the ballet master is in the studio with the choreographer while he's creating, doing our best to learn what he's done, help everyone remember. We take our own form of notation to help us remember. We work with the pianist to make sure we're all on the same starting point of whatever scene we're doing. And then if in the future, after the ballet is created, we're responsible to recreate it in the studio, to teach it to new dancers, to replace someone who's sick or injured, and just kind of be the custodian of the piece thereafter. In working in the studio with Helgi was quite marvelous. The production meant so much to him. It was so clear from the very beginning. He did every role. He showed every character beautifully. Could be Juliet. It could be Mercutio. It could be the nurse. So he gave a very clear idea of what his vision was and what he saw. Very, very generous about that. I think it was probably the biggest event of his life, professionally, at least not a dancer anymore, because I remember the day in the studio when he turned to me and he was just very quiet. He said, I think that was the last few bars of music that I just did. And therefore, I have finished my full-length Romeo and Juliet. And it was just like quiet. I think I was the only one there, and maybe it wasn't for the nurse. It was some other scene. I can't remember, but it was very moving. I like that. I like that memory a lot. But or him showing the nurse, how to stand, and he was very clear. Juliet, who she was, who she is. Very, very good experience.
And lovely you get to be in the studio for all of those moments as part of your job. Jane, I'm going to bring it over to you. Can you tell us more about what you do as a production stage manager and also during performances backstage?
So during the performances, the stage manager is in charge of basically running the show. And so we are the people who call all of the cues from starting the show, taking the curtain out, starting the orchestra, to all the way through all of the lighting changes, the scene changes, through the bows at the end. So, and I go into the studio for something like this, for a full length. I would go into the studio the last week or so of rehearsals when we're running sections and make sure in coordination with the lighting supervisor or with any of the set designers, making sure that we know where in the music each of, where this scenery should move, where the light cue should happen and all of that, and coordinating all of that, and then dispensing all that information to the crew and who moves everything. And then on stage, it's going through and moving each thing as it needs to move, I guess.
Yeah, step by step, everything that needs to happen. Jane's on it. All right, Marty, coming over to you. You choreographed the movement for the fight scenes in Romeo and Juliet. Can you tell us more about how you maybe met Helgi and formed your partnership with him to work on this ballet with him?
Yes, I was just sending out my letters to many theatrical places, not just the theaters, but also to ballets and operas. And I was corresponded with Deborah Bernard, who was the manager at the time, and she asked me to meet. They were in New York City, and so was I. So I met Helgi at the ballet in New York, Lincoln Center, and we met in a room there. He didn't know, but I went and studied on him for a while at the library, at the Arts Library, and saw pictures, movies of his ballet and what he did choreographed, and who his family was, and how old he was, and where he was from. And so he spoke Icelandic, so I had a friend at the Scandinavian consulate who coached me in saying hello and hi, how are you in Icelandic, just for fun. And I can't even remember, it's so hard. And I practiced that for weeks, and I walked in and I said my Icelandic words, and he laughed at me and he said, "Where did you learn that?" And I said, "That's all I got." And we sat down and he told me about his Romeo and Juliet and what he thought. And it really helped to know how he choreographed other ballets, because he's a very elegant choreographer. He's very, very sincere about his movements and style. And I told him, well, our styles are gonna, are gonna juxtapose because my style is more realistic than yours. I may have to tame mine back, but I said, wouldn't it be interesting if the fights were visceral and were really strong and powerful, and they weren't just on the beat of the music like I've seen many ballets do. I got a lot of inspiration from Kranko when I watched that ballet in Russia, and they did a television version of that, and they did what I thought would be necessary, more theatrical than it was ballet at the time. So I thought having this elegant movement and then this visceral fight would give us a broader outlook about the ballet, and would bring tension into the ballet. And then the relief, of course, would be the pas de deux or some of the humor stuff. And Anita especially is very humorous as the nurse, and I appreciated that. Terrific actor, by the way, she is. And so I worked on that, and I worked on the fights different way, because I had to study the Prokofiev of music. So I listened to music over and over and again, and I had a great assistant who was a musician, and what we did was I choreographed and notated my work on certain beats of the music, so they were there and present, which gave it a nice form, especially the brawl, which I wanted to make as confusing and as possible as a brawl should be. And then, of course, very succinct fights with Mercutio and Romeo and Tybalt, which were strong, and they weren't exactly. They were from my perspective, historically accurate movements, and I designed the swords with a sword maker to make sure they were of the time of in Italy at that time, and we worked on that quite diligently. And it was, I had to teach an entire company this, because you can't just teach one person the choreography, because there's many casts, and there's also backups, and it's really a crew, and it takes a lot of work. And I enjoyed that. And then, of course, I got to be, and as the time went on, I got to help Anita and Helgi choreograph the background players, because in a story ballet, not everybody's dancing. And I wanted to bring an acting element to it. So then things were going on while the dances, not to draw focus, but to bring life to the background, like the children actually fighting with wooden swords, and pulling girls' hair and running around, and men arguing and women arguing, and we had patrons. And I had a lot of fun with Anita. We had such a good time doing that with the background. It was a lot of fun. We used the balcony and everything. As you can see, the set's behind me here. And we just wanted to create an Italian life village, and with that ballet. And so when I discussed with Helgi, going back to the interview, I told him what I wanted to do, and he found that very interesting and also challenging for him, because it was out of his comfort zone. But to his credit, he trusted me, which is a big thing. I mean, this was very important to him. And to this day, I just am very grateful that he actually trusted me. We became really good friends. And I supported him, and he supported me. And we had a great collaboration with Anita and all our ballet masters, Betsy, everyone. And we all worked together to bring this vision together. And so our hearts are in it. It wasn't just work for me, as I suppose it was it was a labor of love as far as I'm concerned.
Really wonderful. I mean, and something that's always come through, and I work with everyone who's on this call, and Helgi as well, and there's a lot of care for this production, which really comes through with what you said, Marty. This is making me kind of curious. So Romeo and Juliet is one of the most well-known love stories of all time. Prior to working on this production, and I'll throw this out to anyone who has something they'd like to share, what were some of your experiences with the ballet beforehand, or how did any of those experiences inform your creative work on this ballet? Does anyone have a memory that stands out for them?
I've actually worked on two other productions. One was Kent Stoll's at Pacific Northwest Ballet, which was the story's the same, but quite different because it used different music. And then I worked on Danny Pelzig's version at Boston Ballet. So again, the story has a framework and you have a lot of the same things, but very different. They're all very different in how they tell the story in many ways. So it's always interesting to me to come and to work on another production, because even though you think, even like with Nutcracker, you think, oh, I know it all, I've seen it 1,000 times, but everybody's is different. And there are things that are much different and brought out more in one production versus another.
Yeah, I also worked for Pacific Coast Ballet for Mr. Stoll. He brought me up there and I helped on some of the choreography up there. But I had my background, of course, was in theater. So I had done the production many times. And like Jane said, everyone does it differently because everyone is different. And the interpretations are, it could be strong, weak, but they're their interpretations. And you have to actually just kind of, especially in theater and ballet, and I worked for the operas, live in the moment. I mean, that's what an actor does. They live in the moment and the expression goes on. Even though the choreography is set, the way you do it or the way you approach it, there's a personality involved. And just like a good singer, they have to be emotionally connected to their movements. Actors have to be emotionally connected to their lines. And this is wonderful to see after you've had all these experiences and seeing how we're doing this. But I enjoyed it tremendously. Romeo and Juliet have brought many Shakespeare productions across the country, and many Tybalts and many Romeos. I was never a Romeo, but I was the Tybalt, as you can see by his face.
I had the experience of working on the former San Francisco Ballet production of Romeo and Juliet, which was Michael Smuen's, and that was fabulous. It caused a lot of exposure for the company, and it was quite wonderful. We toured a lot, but I think that what stands out to me, one thing, is that Michael researched, and historically he found that women at the time also learned fencing, and so he incorporated fencing for the women, for the harlots specifically. So we actually went to fight class and learned the different moves. So I still remember some of that, because I was actually Lady Catherine in that production, but I was also the Red Harlot. So that was wonderful. I got to fight Romeo. It was very different. The interpretation was very different, but that's what it's all about, is everybody can see things their way, and it's all good.
And curious, I actually saw that production with Anita in it. I was at the conservatory, American Conservatory Theater, and my fencing instructor, my combat instructor, was J. Stephen White. So he actually did the choreography for that show. And so I had that experience, not only knowing that and seeing that production and seeing Anita at that time. But she's absolutely right. And we don't have women fencing, but we do have harlots fighting.
Yeah.
Which they have very well. If it's Italy and it's anything like my family, it's extremely passionate. And yeah, it was a wonderful experience to see that and then see the difference between the two.
Yeah, actually, so I have a question for you, Marty, which is a little bit of a follow-up, but you've talked about, your various experiences, and you've choreographed a lot of fight scenes in your career. And you've worked with a lot of actors, and you've also worked with a lot of dancers. So I'm wondering, how is it different working with actors versus working with dancers? Is there anything that stands out to you about that?
I like when I work with actors, they have a lot of connection, a lot of great actors, but they don't have maybe, let's say, the physical attributes that a dancer would have. And so I have to choreograph for the actor and his physical limitations or his great talents. Because what you don't want to do in my world is choreograph something for your own ego, because it doesn't look good. The fight has to be connected to the story. It can't just go off on its own and become something boring and self-indulgent. as a choreographer. And when you have an actor who he's a terrific actor, sometimes the sword fight is a little shorter or is not so complicated as long as we can keep the tension there. And when you work with dancers, you have these amazing athletes, but you have to train them in a different way since they're so good with their expression and their arms that the let's say the austereness of how the positions of the sword are important, because you have to know these positions, just like you have to know first and second in ballet. You have to be able to get to them naturally. But I found working with dancers, wonderful physical technique, and sometimes they were disconnected from the sword and they didn't understand that. So that's where you had to actually coach them in an actor's way to get into the fight, where it became something important to them, and not just touching swords. That's not what we want. We wanted to have, what is the fight? So just like I did it with actors, I created a scenario on the side with every one of the dancers and explained to them, all right, you're from this village. This is a person that you like, or this is a person that you don't like. So they actually had a lot of relationships that they made up, and I made them all have Italian names, and it was fun. But it was really important because they became more connected to the piece, and they became more connected to my choreography, which has a lot to do with acting the fight. If you just do a fight and there's no acting, there's no intention involved, it's very boring. It means nothing. So I found, without lines, which is even harder, the dancers, especially the San Francisco Ballet, I mean, these are world-class dancers. I mean, incredible. And it was just like a gift to have these incredible athletes and really knowledgeable people of their movement and their understanding of their emotions connecting to that movement. And I found that pleasurable and really an honor to work with them.
Wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to pivot just a little bit, and I'd like to talk about Jan Jakob Warsaw, who was the designer for the production, and from what I've heard was another very important collaborator for Helgi on this production. And I don't actually know the answer to this, but did any of you work with him in the creation of the costumes and sets?
I did. Not Romeo, but I think he came for the fittings for his Swan Lake many years ago. And what I remember is just his attention to detail was just phenomenal. But my memory is of going into the costume room and seeing him personally pinning on little jewels on the bodice of a, don't know if it was a man or a woman, but little tiny things, and he was actually doing it himself, so that he got it just the way he thought it should be.
Yeah, well, so he was a Danish designer who very sadly passed away right around the time that Romeo and Juliet premiered. And I know he was a very important collaborator for Helgi, and I also am thinking about this because that connection to Denmark was really was just also special because we got to travel there in 2019 and perform the production. And I think the audiences there were really excited to see his work in Denmark. And the other thing that strikes me, especially, having been fortunate enough to be on that tour, is it's just such a beautiful production. The costumes, as you say, Anita, are just so detailed, and the sets are gigantic. And it was just wild for me to imagine how, to be there and think, wow, we brought all of this from San Francisco, and it's just a really huge production. So that said, Jane, I was wondering if you might be able to tell us a little bit more about what it takes to bring something of that size overseas to do just 4 performances. Can you tell us more about that?
It's a lot. And it's sort of, you don't always think about, you kind of think of it in the grand term, and then you kind of get down to the little details and you realize, wow, this is a lot to take all this. It was 6 shipping containers that we took with us. And it was just, this was just Romeo and Juliet. On other tours, we've taken it with other ballets, so there've been more, but this was 6 containers of just Romeo and Juliet. We do a ton of preliminary work. Chris Dennis had gone, seen the theater. You know, you understand where everything goes. We have all the measurements. Our crew and our crew heads know, you know, where everything's going to go, how they're going to hang it when they get there, because we really only have a couple of days, if that, to get everything hung in the air, lighting focused, and get on stage. We ship everything. Generally, overseas shipping is about 6 weeks. So 6 to 7 weeks out, we load the containers and send them on their way and meet them there a month and a half later to unload. And like I said, it's a day or two. But the crew starts in the morning and they put the floor down, they hang all of the scenery, they focus the lights. The dancers rehearse in the studio, but they've done all of their rehearsal here in San Francisco. If the stage is slightly different from ours, we tape everything out in the studio so they know about where the scenery is going to be. And we are able to then walk in and do a rehearsal. And it really is pretty remarkable because we don't take a huge amount of crew. We take all of our crew heads, but all of the rest of the crew is local. And so they know their theater, they know how, you know, they know their job, but then it's upon our crew to then say, okay, you know, you're going to take this part and you're going to do this, you're going to do this, this is where we're going to store everything. But most of that, as much as can be, is done ahead of time and worked out. And then you get there and adjust as needed. But it is impressive to walk in and just see all this stuff come out of these containers and become a huge, amazing set, and all these beautiful costumes come out and stuff.
Yeah, truly. Anita and Marty, anything else that you would add from your scope of work that is something that you know, it's just interesting to think about having to get up and running in a new city?
Well, the set itself, just going back to the ends, I worked with Helgi, and he was indirect because he was in Copenhagen, and I asked him to do some modifications for the fight scenes, like strengthening the bridge across. He also put pegs for I have Romeo actually climbing down off of there and jumping down off of something, which is not normal in a ballet. And so he was amenable to those requests. Even, you know, I didn't mess up his design, but he saw where he could put them in, and that was really nice. And bringing a ballet like that over, and Janie kind of said it all. We had 2 sets of swords, so we shipped 1 set already gone, so we can still rehearse with some here. Moving a production like that, you're in awe, and especially when we first got there first day. I mean, watching these guys work so fast to hang the lights. We only had a couple of days, literally, you know, hours, you know, maybe hours and change. And it was amazing how well they worked together, and that had a lot to say about the coordination of Christopher Dennis, who's fantastic to get that all together like that, and Janie, you know, just coming in and being able to handle that. That's a different talent.
Another piece that I've enjoyed over the years a lot, Marty, with you, is we get the assignment of taking care of the supernumeraries, including the children, which is pretty easy here in San Francisco. We've got a big ballet school, and we can scope it out and see who would be good this time for the little boys who sword fight on stage, and the little girls who are, you know, sharp enough that they know where to run and when to hide, because it's dangerous out there. They have to have very good instructions about safety. But my favorite was in Copenhagen. We had adorable children, but the communication was not real easy. And in one case, we had an older boy who spoke very, very good English, and another little boy, remember, and he spoke almost not a word. And it was hard to teach him. And also, they were so pacifist. It didn't seem like any of those children had ever had a Ken sword. I thought that spoke something about the Danish culture, actually. But anyway, we decided, in the long haul, we decided that the older boy would be teaching the younger boy, which we'd never done before. We just invented it because it was so disparate, their abilities. So we'd actually say, now you hold it here, and now we're going to go like this. And so the one became the teacher and the one became the pupil. I thought that was it. But we've had many, many experiences like that in here in San Francisco and on tour with the Everett Mart lines up the children from the local ballet school, and whoever comes is who we got. So it's another place to become creative.
Anita, will you tell us what a supernumerary is for those who don't know?
A supernumerary is an extra in a production who's not a union dancer, not even necessarily a professional. They get a small stipend usually, but they're basically want to do it to be on stage and to see the production and be a part of it, and have their picture taken in a guard costume. And
Yeah, we had to teach them how to use those halberds.
yeah,
And a lot of, like she said, the different culture, you can give a guy, you can go to Brooklyn, I'll give a guy a halberd, he'll probably figure it out really fast. There, they were like, oh, how does this work? And so, yeah, we had, there was a lot of training. We had to work really fast, Anita and I, with the children and with the adults who played the guards in my scene, who had to come down and break up the fight. So they actually did, something. And it was important that they went off on the music. And so they learned that, because if they're not there on the music, it could be dicey. But it was fun. It was very much a good time.
our tradition, Marty. We go in on the day that all the dancers are free for travel, and then we're there meeting the supernumeraries, and Amelia's there too.
Yeah.
Working hard every day on tour. You got to make the most of it. And just one more question about Copenhagen, and especially, because Jane, you hear what's going on, and Anita and Marty, you both have roles on stage during the production. Are Danish audiences any different from American audiences? Did anything stand out to you about that?
They were extremely appreciative. I mean, they really enjoyed, they understood the gravity of the situation about the designer and Helgi himself, who's very well known there. And we actually had the Queen, Denmark, actually came to the production, and we did a full company bow, which we, hardly ever do except in rare occasions. And we were all did that bow, but I found the audience is extremely receptive and vocal. It was nice because they fed back their laughter. They were open, their cheers, their applause, and they were like, if you were on the stage, it was like they were right there with you. You can hear them breathing.
There's a special connection there for sure. Another collaborator, although not someone anyone would have met, is the composer. And I guess I'm just interested in hearing about if anyone has anything to say about how the music carries this production, or perhaps why Helgi chose the Prokofiev score. Does anyone have any thoughts on like the relationship between this score and this production?
I think this particular score, I love the music to this ballet, the Prokofiev music. And like I said, I had done Kent Stoll's version, and he used Tchaikovsky, so it was very different. There's something, and maybe it's just because I've done this production so many times now, but there's something about the music that really pulls you with it and tells the story. And so I think that the music is really, I think in dance, music is always really a part of the story. But in this in particular, you hear, to me, you know what is happening based on, there's the seriousness and the fun and the brawl and there's something about this score that really pulls you in, I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
I know he considered using something else, and was thinking about it, and just came to the conclusion, which I completely agree with, is it has to be the Prokofiev score I think it's the range of emotion that the music covers, from comedy to tragedy, and intense romantic feelings and sword fighting. It's just all there. It is so all there.
Yeah,
And
it's another, like the set. The set is a character for us. It's another character, and the music, of course, are all the characters. And I remember listening to the music over and over again, and I can actually see the fight before I even choreographed it. I saw the picture. It's almost like a movie score. It's incredible, and you feel all the emotion that comes with it, and all the passion that he had in the ballet. And he specifically told that story, and it's a linear thing. You could see it. I mean, when you can hear it, so you can see it, envision it. And like Anita said, the music for the fights is intense, and that's why it matched. That bum 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 bum, bum, and it's so fast. The hardest fight is Romeo and Tybalt, which is extremely fast, and you have to be damn precise doing that fight. You can't just mess it up. There's only two people fighting, and if you mess it up, it could be trouble. But the speed of which it's going, and you have to be careful not to let the actors crescendo off the music. They have to kind of feel it and feel that. But I just remember that fight and just seeing it in my head before I even choreographed.
Music is a very important part of any ballet, for sure, especially when you don't have the words to guide the story. So we're coming up on time, but I wanted to ask one last question that's much more general. And that is related to the San Francisco Ballet just announced our 2022 season with the planned return to live performances next year. And I am just curious, and maybe very briefly from each of you, what are you looking forward to about bringing audiences and dancers back to the theater, or about the 2022 season in particular? Like, just any thoughts on getting big groups of people back for something like this?
Well, I think the dancers are the ones who come to my mind first, because they're just miss it so much. They want to be there. They want to be putting on their makeup and getting exhausted with 2 shows a day and 8 shows, 7 shows a week. They just crave dancing. They're dancing, they can dance. There's music, they're in the studio, they have class, they can feel invigorated by it, but it's the performance that they just are craving so much to get back to. Personally, I have a little spot for Mrs. Robinson, Kathy Marston's work, because we got so close to filming it this year, and just the day before we had to cancel because of the pandemic, and we got as far as seeing the set on the stage and the light and some lighting and some of the pop duets, so that will be a real achievement to get that one done.
Yeah, it's about, and being an old actor, been on stage many times. To me, and I know the dancers feel this, it's the connection with the audience. A live audience becomes a soul melding kind of feeling when they respond, and you can feel their energy, and it is a relatable moment. It's a live theater with a live audience, and they're just a part as much as the production as the actors a lot of the times, because their interest, you can feel that energy coming off the audience and onto you, and actually provoking sometimes a performance out of you that you didn't think was there before. And that's what we're missing, and that's what it's important to have, that live connection. Live theater, live connection, touching people. We all know it. I mean, this is Zoom, but we all miss our families. We all miss our friends, and just being in their presence and feeling that trade of energy, or I like to say soul mingling, that we miss a lot for all of us sentient beings that we are.
And I think to add, not just being in front of an audience again, but in being able to do a ballet on stage again, but it's the collaboration with the orchestra and with the crew, and having everybody back in the same building. And we've found so many new ways to collaborate this year. and we've done amazing things, I think, as a company and as an industry. There've been a lot of wonderful things, but you miss that in-person collaboration and having the orchestra there with you and the conductor and having the crew and the dancers and also the audience. I think to bring it all back together again.
Wow. Yeah, all of those things. I completely hear you. All right, I'm going to ask Jenny to pop back on and let us know if we had any questions come in from the comments, just to see.
Thank you, Amelia, and thank you, everyone. We didn't have any questions, but we had one really nice comment that I would like to share with everyone before we end. One of our YouTube viewers said, "It's wonderful to learn of these details and of the production's creation and continuation. It's a joy to hear everyone's passion, deep knowledge, and commitment. Thank you." So I think I will just echo that and we'll wrap it up if that works for you, Amelia.
It does. Thank you so much, Jane, Marty, and Anita for doing this with me. I always love hearing you talk about the work that you do because you're so passionate about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just echo that and say thank you to Amelia, to Anita, Jane, and Marty. And thank you to all of our audience members out there for joining us at this Points of View lecture. You can visit our website to learn more about our digital season and our variety of educational offerings. We've still got a couple coming up before the season is over, both about Romeo and Juliet and about Swan Lake, which we'll end our digital season with. So on behalf of San Francisco Ballet, I want to say a huge thank you and wishing you